I came into this world scared of new things and scared of new people. This fear was so strong, it would cut off my voice as soon as I left the house, and people used to think I was not able to speak at all. This picture was taken in the Amsterdam Zoo when I was 2 years old and super scared of the photographer as well as his camera. Today, I'm not this scared little girl. As I grew up, I changed my relationship to fear, but it was not a quick process. Preparing for this talk, I went through my old photo books, and I was struck by the shadow of fear visible on most of my childhood pictures. Even at my birthday parties, I looked kind of scared. There was this picture of my 13th birthday, and it brought back a memory of a phone call I received that day. I can see myself walking over to the telephone table, which we had in the 80s, picking up the receiver of the phone, and I heard a woman say she had scouted me during a school play and was offering me a main part in a movie. And I felt this raging fear wash over me, paralyzing my vocal cords. As I couldn't speak, I simply hung up. And that was the end of my career as a movie star. Who of you ever felt limited by fear? So you and I know then that we can't reason with fear. Fear will find counter-arguments for any logic you try to fight it with. When you try reasoning with fear, you will end up with a very limited version of yourself. Looking through those old photos, I realized that I have allowed fear to imprison me for the first 25 years of my life. I had to go all the way to the year 2002 to find a fear-free picture. I was backpacking by myself in Mexico, and I had just hitched a ride in the back of a pickup truck. And I can only tell you this here because my mom is not in the audience. That was the first time I traveled alone. And when my dad drove me to the airport, he asked me, "Are you scared?" And of course I wasn't able to speak, so I just nodded. And I desperately wanted him to turn around. But I went. And as soon as the airplane took off, I felt this deep sense of trust that this trip was going to be epic. And it was. You can tell by the look on my face in that picture. Who of you ever did something despite being super scared? So you know then that willpower does work against fear. It does. When we truly want something, we will find the courage and the resources to make it happen. But willpower only works against fear when we have a clear vision of what we want to do, when we stop allowing fear to hold us back. I received such a vision as an adolescent. Growing up in the 80s, I saw the effects of economic recession everywhere, and I got bombarded with images of war, famine, protest, and environmental disaster. And while other kids were worried about school, I complained to my mom that the world was sick. And she said, "Well, then make it better." And I started to believe that maybe I was meant to help create a healthier world. I realized that no individual will ever be able to solve the complex challenges our world is facing alone. I figured we would need think and do tanks consisting of very diverse people working together to find out-of-the-box solutions. I saw myself participating in such groups as well as leading them and teaching others how to do this. And today, as a co-creator, that's exactly what I do. But first, I had to find my voice and open up to others. After I graduated from high school, I figured university would be my ideal experimentation ground since no one there knew I was actually super shy. Over the years, I had studied extroverted people, and I had noticed that they always tend to take up a lot of space, both physically and verbally. So at the very first study group of that year, I occupied 2 chairs with my body and my stuff, and I was the first to speak out loud, using wide hand gestures and throwing in jokes to relax myself. And to my surprise, this worked. I found that whenever I spoke my mind, others would build on what I had said, and I loved it. So feeling braver now, I left my comfort zone, I started traveling, and I lived abroad. And this helped me to expand my perspective. And I observed that although my own generation seemed mostly caught up in the daily rat race, there were more and more people, especially the younger generation, some of whom we've seen on stage here, choosing different priorities. I saw an increasing focus on creating value rather than just making profit. An intensifying call to organizations and governments to be more ethical, and a growing thirst among customers and citizens to be involved as equals in decision-making. What I observed, in other words, is that we are in the middle of a radical paradigm shift. Our values and the way we work are shifting from dominance to collaboration, from sending to sharing, and from closed to open. The power paradigm is crumbling, while the co-creation paradigm is emerging. While we are in the transition phase, we can see both paradigms in action. On the one hand, we see organizations and governments holding on to their dominating and secretive ways and being criticized for it by the masses. The more resistance these organizations meet, the more power play they'll show off, since that's the only language they speak. On the other hand, we see new organizations embracing values such as sustainability, equality, and transparency. And we see existing organizations and governments reinventing themselves and inviting their customers and citizens to help them improve. At this point, we can still be successful following the principles of the power paradigm, but this will not last. The push towards the co-creation paradigm is getting stronger every day. And this means that in order to stay relevant for citizens, customers, and employees, all of us eventually will have to cross over to the co-creation paradigm. What does that mean, crossing over to the co-creation paradigm? I can tell you it does not mean you won't have any fears anymore. Right now, if I want to, I can listen into the voice of fear in myself, and it says, "Stefanie, don't you realize those people really don't have any interest in what you're saying?" Crossing over to the co-creation paradigm means taking full responsibility of your own decisions and their consequences. It means realizing we always have a choice. Right now, I can choose to listen to that voice of fear and make myself invisible, like it's telling me to do, or I can choose to listen deeper. And when I do that, I hear a very different voice, the voice of trust. And it says, "Stefanie, you have something worthy to share, and there's this awesome audience willing to listen. You guys are co-creating the prerequisites of a healthier world right here." Crossing over to the co-creation paradigm means choosing the voice of trust over the voice of fear. Once we fully trust ourselves and each other, we will see that each and every one of us has a unique perspective, unique experiences, and unique gifts. And when we see that, we will move beyond fear of the unknown, fear of not fitting in, fear of abandonment, and fear of rejection, just to name a few. We will see that we are different because we're meant to complement each other. Whenever we face a challenge, we will want to solve it together with everyone it matters to, especially if they're different from ourselves, because we will realize that co-creation by multidisciplinary think and do tanks is the most efficient, effective, and fun way towards creating a sustainable society. Does this sound like utopia to you? It's not. The co-creation paradigm is here, and anyone can choose to live by its principles. And should you want to know more about those principles, just Google the 7 principles of complete co-creation. Productive collaboration between likely and unlikely parties is taking place all over the world as we speak. I'll walk you through an example from my own work as a co-creator, but first, I'd like you to think back to the first foreign language you learned at school. Did your teacher inspire you? What about the method you used? Did it interest you? Chances are you were able to recall your teacher, but not the method. This is because most educational methods are not very inspiring to the students. Back in 2011, a new educational publisher called Blink decided this needed to change and set out creating new methods, starting with the interests of the students. I was involved in their first product, GrooveMe, a method English for elementary school children. Within half a year, GrooveMe realized a market share of over 50% and did this in an already satisfied market. 8 years later, GrooveMe has maintained this market share. Why is GrooveMe so successful? In short, because children as end users were part of the co-creation team, which further consisted of publishers, educational experts, software experts, and teachers. Had the publishers followed their reflex and just developed something based on assumptions, they would have never learned that music is both the means and the motivation for Dutch children to learn English. Working directly with children evoked a deep sense of trust among all the involved parties that a method based on music was going to work out just fine. And although the numbers don't lie, and research shows that teachers believe children learn English better and faster with GrooveMe than with other methods, nothing is more convincing than seeing it with your own eyes.
Bovendien worden er veel meer woorden geleerd op deze manier dan met de oude methode.
Eerst krijgt de klas woorden uit een songtekst te zien. Ze mogen raden uit welk lied deze woorden afkomstig zijn.
Gaan we naar de volgende, Walter.
Dan worden vragen gesteld over de band en over de tekst. Wat wordt er eigenlijk gezongen? En waarom gebruikt de band deze tekst? Wat bedoelen ze daarmee?
Jump off that sofa. Let's get it up. We shut it down. Let's turn the roof.
Nou, door die liedjes leer je ook weer heel veel nieuwe woorden.
Je zit ook lekker te zingen en iedereen doet mee.
So how does that compare to the way you learned your first foreign language? So if co-creation is this recipe for guaranteed success to be gained in a fun and rewarding way, yielding value for everyone involved, then why aren't we all working this way? Despite its benefits, I encounter numerous barriers every day. And the top 5 are: co-creation is too expensive. It takes too much time. We don't have the capacity. Not everyone is creative. And stakeholders have clashing objectives. Usually, I rely on logic to help overcome these barriers. I can build a strong case as to why co-creation is actually more efficient in terms of time and money than other creative methods, and why just giving it a try will help you overcome any barriers you might have. Today, I'm taking a different approach. If you decide co-creation is not for you, I'm not going to convince you otherwise. I just want to ask you, does your decision come from a place of trust, or does it come from a place of fear? How you can tell the difference? If your decision is trust-based, you will feel relaxed and confident about it, and you will have a clear vision of what you want to accomplish and how your decision fits into this bigger picture. You don't necessarily reject co-creation, it just doesn't fit your vision right now. If your decision is fear-based, you will feel kind of clingy towards it, and it may be surrounded by a vague sense of doom, as if something bad might happen if you conducted a co-creation experiment. For sure, you will feel resistant, and your mind gets busy phrasing all kinds of reasons why co-creation doesn't work for you, including the ones I just mentioned. As a natural-born fear expert, let me give you this rule of thumb. Whenever you feel clingy towards what's familiar, along with a sense of resistance against what's new, you are suffering from fear of the unknown. I know this fear very well. It used to be my demon, but now I welcome it as my faithful guide, pointing out areas for personal growth. And as you can deduct, the TEDx stage has been one of those areas. And I can tell you that, indeed, accepting the challenge to speak here has proven to be super scary. I mean, a great boost for my personal growth. So whenever you find yourself thinking that something is not for you, just think back of that super shy girl making it to a TEDx stage. If I can do that, anyone can. Thank you.